They thought I was the one unraveling. But while they whispered lies behind closed doors, my 9-year-old daughter was recording every word. Hey everyone, glad you're here. Thanks for coming back. I've got something new to share today, something raw and deeply personal. My name's Jake Miller, I'm 43 years old, and what I'm about to tell you is how I took every harsh lesson the military ever etched into me, not to fight a foreign war, but to pull my daughter and myself out of a betrayal that nearly shattered our entire world. It started small. Almost invisible, like the quiet rumble before an earthquake. My wife, Rachel, began placing her phone screen down during dinner. Not once or twice, but every single evening for nearly 2 weeks. At first I brushed it off. Thought maybe it was just a new habit, nothing worth reading into. But then came the overtime, those mysterious late nights at the office. Meetings that somehow dragged on long after most people had already clocked out. And every time she came home, the first thing she'd do, without fail, was rush to take a shower. Even on days when she'd already showered before leaving the house that morning. It wasn't just her actions though. It was something deeper. Her presence felt different. Distant. Like her soul had drifted far away from the life we built together. She was physically there, but mentally, she was 1,000 miles off, lost in some life I wasn't part of. My background in Army intelligence had trained me well. Observation. Gathering intel. Picking up on inconsistencies and reading between the lines. Civilian life hadn't dulled those instincts one bit. I didn't confront her. Didn't jump to accusations. I just started paying attention. Closely. The real shift came the night she told me a court hearing had gone longer than expected. But something didn't sit right. I pulled up our credit card transactions and there it was, clear as day. A dinner charge from a trendy bistro downtown. A place nowhere near the courthouse. Not during business hours. And not the kind of spot you go to alone. A quick phone call confirmed what my gut already knew. Was a table for two. Reserved under the name, Nathan Cole. I spent the next 2 days combing through everything. Her calendar. Hotel receipts. Duplicate entries that didn't align. 2 wine glasses in the dishwasher, both with traces of lipstick, even though we'd only opened 1 bottle and I hadn't touched a drop. Eventually the picture came into focus. Nathan Cole. A real estate big shot. Twice divorced. Famous around town for his polished high-rises and a love life to match. Always seen with someone new, someone younger, someone who wasn't his. Nathan was the kind of guy who led with his wallet and let his polished charm smooth over whatever wreckage he left behind. I'd never met him face to face, but his digital trail lit up like Vegas. Rachel wasn't his first affair, and I doubted she'd be his last. But this one, this time, it wasn't just another fling for him. Cut into my home. My family. And for me that made it personal. It was a rainy Thursday when it all came crashing down. I came home early that day, no call, no warning. Just had a feeling. The house was unnaturally still. Rachel's car was in the driveway, parked like normal. But 2 spots over there was another vehicle, a sleek, black Mercedes. The kind that announces its presence without needing to make a sound. Inside the air was dim, the lights barely glowing. From the living room speaker, soft jazz played, just loud enough to blanket the silence. Right by the door, a pair of neatly placed men's dress shoes sat waiting. Polished. Expensive. I didn't say a word. My training had embedded one lesson deeper than any other. Silence is leverage. I pulled out my phone, hit the record button, and moved through the house like smoke. Quiet. Invisible. At the top of the stairs, the bedroom door wasn't shut all the way. Through the narrow opening, I heard voices. A laugh followed by hushed tones. Soft, intimate. I didn't need a visual. What I heard told me more than enough. I stayed there just long enough to capture the audio. Then I slipped back downstairs, calm and collected, my mind moving faster than my heart. I waited in the living room. Not pacing. Not fidgeting. Just sitting. Still. Like a shadow waiting for dawn. About an hour passed before they came down. Both dressed now, but the air around them was heavy. You could feel the unease clinging to the walls. Rachel stopped dead when she saw me. Her face turned pale in an instant, like someone pulled the life out of her. Nathan, though, he wore that same smirk I'd seen in every online photo. Like it was all a joke to him. Jake, he said, casual as if we were old friends meeting unexpectedly. Didn't think you'd be back this soon. But hey, things happen, right? Some women just need more than a part-time husband can give. I looked straight at him. No fury. No panic. Just calm, steady resolve. A silence more terrifying than any shouting match could ever be. You've got no idea what I'm capable of giving, I said, voice low and level. But I promise, you're about to find out. Rachel opened her mouth, maybe to explain or maybe to apologize, but I was already walking past her. I stepped out into the rain. Let it soak through my shirt, let it cool whatever fire still flickered inside. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. I just kept walking. His hands never shook. Not even once. Because this wasn't the point where I broke. No, this was the point where I decided, no matter what they threw at me, I wouldn't lose my grip. I wouldn't give them that. Jake Miller didn't enter any battlefield, physical or emotional, without a plan in place. And right there, standing in the aftermath of betrayal, a new mission was already forming in my mind. By the time Monday rolled around, Rachel had already lawyered up. And not just any attorney. She went straight to Mark Bennett, one of the most cutthroat family lawyers in the entire state. The kind of guy who made his name with courtroom dramatics and scorched earth tactics. He didn't deal in negotiations or fair outcomes. His specialty was destruction. And in this case, his target was crystal clear. Me. The approach they took was as cruel as it was calculated. Their entire strategy boiled down to a single goal: wipe out my credibility. Completely. They twisted my military background into something sinister. Made my intelligence training sound like some twisted obsession with power. Labeled me as an unstable veteran, haunted by unresolved trauma, a man who couldn't tell the difference between a war zone and his own living room. They painted me as a ticking time bomb, disciplined on the outside, dangerous underneath, hiding behind medals and routines. A threat in plain sight. Within just days, the court filings were stacked thick with claims. Rachel accused me of tracking her movements for years, of tapping her phone, breaking into her email, even manipulating our daughter, Emma. She said she feared for her safety. Feared for Emma's well-being. She told the court that with my surveillance skills and combat background, I might just vanish with our daughter one day, take her and disappear without a trace. Every line of it was rehearsed. Every word part of a story they'd carefully stitched together. And there he was, Nathan, sitting a few rows behind her during the first hearing. That smug, polished face looking so supportive, so concerned. To anyone else, he looked like the concerned new partner, quietly backing the woman he cared about. But I saw right through it. It was theater. All of it. They weren't just fighting for custody. They were trying to erase who I was. Everything I'd ever done. Every sacrifice I'd ever made. They wanted to take what I was trained to be and use it to break me. I sat there cold and quiet. When Rachel took the stand, her voice cracked just enough to sound fragile, her hands wrung together in just the right way. She knew how to perform. And she was playing the role of the fearful mother to perfection. She stood there, describing me like I was a stranger she feared. Said I was cold, unpredictable, emotionally unavailable. She spoke about how I followed strict routines, used vague language like coded messages, and played psychological games that kept her on edge. You could see the room leaning in. Some people nodded, others looked over at me like they were trying to decide whether they believed her or not. But I didn't react. Not a twitch. Then her lawyer, Bennett, took the floor, and that's when the real attack began. He didn't hold back. He laid out timelines that were completely made up, suggesting that I'd been spying on Rachel long before the affair even started. He tried to blur the line between my work in cybersecurity and the personal boundaries of our marriage, claiming I didn't know when to shut off the mission mindset. He painted me like some kind of paranoid soldier, always on high alert, always scanning for threats even in my own home. He said I treated Rachel like a suspect, like an enemy to be neutralized, not a partner to be loved. They brought in evidence, screenshots of messages I never wrote, voicemails that had been chopped up and stitched together to make me sound like I was tracking her. They even submitted a photo of a military-issued notepad with some messy scribbles, claiming it was filled with coded tactics about my daughter's pickup schedule, as if I was planning an ambush, not parenting. The accusations were outlandish. But the thing is, fear doesn't need facts. It only needs suggestion. And when you've got a room full of people who don't understand what makes a soldier tick, who don't understand calm under pressure, it's easy to twist quiet into threat. Still, I didn't say a word. Not in the courtroom. Not in the hallway interviews. Not even in the war room with my own lawyers. Because I wasn't preparing a defense. I was preparing something much bigger. Something they wouldn't see coming. While Rachel and Bennett were busy turning lies into theater, I was already working, quietly, methodically. Every move they made, every whisper they thought was safe, I had documented. I had recordings. Not just of the affair but of everything leading up to it. Conversations between Rachel and Nathan talking about how to push my buttons, how to make me snap, how to make me look like the threat they needed me to be. I had audio of Rachel coaching our daughter, Emma, telling her what to say if a social worker asked about me. making sure the script was tight, believable. And I had Nathan on tape too, laughing, saying how easy it was to flip the courts against men like me. Guys who served. Guys who didn't wear emotions on their sleeves. Guys people were afraid to fully understand. They thought I was unraveling. They didn't realize I was listening. He kept watching, kept learning. Every evening, back in the stillness of my apartment, I sat alone, piecing together their lies like fragments of a shattered mirror. Every motion they filed, every dig they made in public, I logged it, turned it into leverage. Rachel didn't realize it yet, but she was building the walls of her own downfall. And Nathan, with all his pride and puffed-up ego, was the one sealing the cracks with concrete. I lived by one rule: never respond with emotion. That's how people like them win. They bait you, make you react, then use your own fire to burn you down. I wasn't about to hand them that. I knew exactly who I was, and I wasn't the unstable man they were trying to convince the court I'd become. I was something far more dangerous. I was calculating, quiet. And now, I was at war. But my weapons weren't fury or chaos. I fought with patience, with precision. While Rachel and Bennett flooded the courtroom with half-truths and theatrical nonsense, I launched a counteroffensive they wouldn't even notice until it was too late to stop. My first move? Hit Nathan where it hurt most: his pride. I built 3 separate online personas, each one crafted to look like seasoned international investors from different corners of the globe. Fake LinkedIn profiles, professional websites, and social media threads loaded with news about the market, credible networking, and insider discussions. Through these identities, I dangled a golden opportunity in front of him. A supposed $50 million luxury condo project, ripe for development, with promises of prestige and international acclaim. Every message was tailored to stroke his ego just right. They called him a visionary. They admired his taste. Told him his name had been making waves across European investment circles. It worked. Nathan didn't hesitate for a second. He bit down so hard he practically swallowed the hook. He pulled away from real clients and shifted focus completely toward this deal. He poured money into architectural sketches, spent hours in meetings with city officials, and began researching properties that didn't even exist. The man even started taking loans against existing projects to make it look like the momentum was real. And all the while I watched. Every email he sent. Every phony conference call. Every carefully staged step into the void I'd created for him. One click closer to collapse. Then I turned my focus to Rachel. I knew her better than anyone, her strengths, her pride, and especially her flaws. She lived for admiration. Needed to be seen, needed to feel like the star of the room. She didn't just want to be a good attorney, she wanted to be the attorney. Admired, applauded, remembered. So I gave her exactly what she craved. Under a veil of anonymity, I began feeding her narrative. I nominated her for obscure legal awards she'd never heard of, crafted entirely by me. I arranged fake interview requests from law journals and legal blogs that didn't exist outside of carefully crafted websites. I even sent inquiries, posing as a recruiter from a sleek Manhattan firm, about a possible fast track to partnership. And she bought it. Every word. Almost overnight, Rachel transformed. She walked taller, talked louder, started referring to herself as a rising star in legal circles. She took on high-stakes clients she had no business representing. She blew through money on designer suits, redecorated her office, hired a PR consultant to shape her brand. But the weight started to crack her. She made promises she couldn't deliver on. Deadlines slipped. Her temper shortened. Clients started to complain. And little by little, her polished image started to show wear. I documented all of it, every case fumble, every client review, every reckless decision. But that wasn't the real plan. My endgame wasn't to break them apart individually, it was to make them turn on each other. With access to Rachel's devices and mirrored messages from Nathan's accounts, I began sowing quiet chaos. A planted receipt here, a suspicious message there. I left the business card of a local private investigator in Nathan's glove compartment. Slipped into his inbox were emails suggesting Rachel had purchased spyware. Financial documents were edited to imply she was leaking details about his accounts. Then I reversed the play. Created phony text messages from Nathan, hinting he'd been photographing Rachel's legal paperwork. I let her discover them, accidentally. And like clockwork they unraveled. Rachel found the investigator's card and started to panic. Nathan saw the emails and his trust cracked. They confronted each other, but neither one could afford to reveal everything. So they spiraled in silence, both suspicious, neither sure what the other knew. Rachel started locking her phone. Nathan stopped answering late-night calls. The paranoia took root and bloomed. And through all of it, Emma stayed with me on weekends. I was the steady one. The one helping with her math homework. The one flipping pancakes on Saturday mornings. The one who sat beside her at night, reading her favorite stories until she fell asleep. I kept Emma insulated from all of it. From the fallout unfolding just a few miles down the road. While the storm raged around us, I made sure she never felt the thunder. She deserved that peace. Meanwhile, I kept building, piece by piece, while Rachel and Nathan still believed they were holding the upper hand. They thought they were pushing me back. They didn't realize they were walking deeper into a maze I had drawn with careful precision. Every step they took, every argument they had, it was all part of the script. Because this wasn't a reaction. It was a strategy. And I'd spent years training for it. Rachel's calls were quietly recorded. Her texts archived. Her downward spiral captured in high definition, from the camera I placed in the corner of her home office, to the one tucked discreetly into a vent in the living room. Victor's own downfall unraveled through his inbox, his frantic business messages, even GPS data from his late-night drives to ghost properties that never existed. I watched it all unfold, frame by frame, like I used to study insurgent movements overseas. Methodically. Dispassionately. I saw Rachel pacing her office at 2 a.m, shouting into her phone, her voice cracked with panic. I watched as Victor's confidence drained away. The fake investment deal had gutted him. He had over-leveraged himself, wrecked his credit, and now foreclosure notices were showing up on 2 of his properties. With his back against the wall, he turned to Rachel, begging for help. Called it a bridge loan. Promised he'd repay her the moment the project came through. But Rachel, already stretched thin from a failing caseload and her crumbling image, didn't see a man in need. She saw betrayal. Thought he was trying to bleed her dry. Then she found them, papers I had slipped into his briefcase during one of his overnight visits. Fabricated documents suggesting he had offshore accounts, and even drafts giving him power of attorney over her legal affairs. All fake, but real enough to her. She snapped. Accused him of plotting to take everything. Claimed he had stolen her legal files. That he'd photographed confidential documents while she slept. And Nathan didn't back down. He fired back with claims of his own, that she had been stealing his financial records, leaking them. They shouted, threatened, accused each other of everything under the sun. Neither of them realized that neither had proof. Because I already had it all. Every word of that shouting match, the yelling, the panic, the desperation, was being recorded in crystal clear audio from a device I had installed behind the air vent in Rachel's foyer. They thought they were unraveling in private. But I was listening. By the time the police showed up, the shouting had already ended. But the echoes still hung in the walls. No one was arrested that night, no charges filed. Just tense statements taken under the cold fluorescent light of suspicion. But that night wasn't about explosions or outbursts. It was about groundwork. It was about patience, silence, and watching every move with purpose. My weapon was never anger. It was evidence. And by then I had it all. Audio, video, documents, conversations. Time-stamped, verified, layered into a digital archive that told the truth more clearly than either of them ever could. I didn't need to destroy them. They were doing that all by themselves. All I had to do was be prepared for when the final moment came. And it was coming. Fast. The courtroom felt like a furnace. Not from heat, but from pressure. Tension burned in every corner, thick in the air. Pale sunlight filtered through narrow windows, catching dust like it was smoke lingering after a firefight. I sat still, watching the scene unfold, knowing exactly how we got here. Every word being spoken was one I had anticipated. Every accusation was another log tossed onto the fire they thought would consume me. Rachel took the stand again. Her voice was sharp, trembling in just the right places. She told the court I was obsessed. That I'd lost the ability to separate protection from control. That I manipulated people the way I once manipulated operations in war zones. She said I didn't just use surveillance, I lived in it. That I treated our daughter, Emma, like a pawn in some twisted game of emotional tactics. Her lawyer, Bennett, didn't hold back. He built on every line she laid down, turning them into a psychological profile that painted me as a threat hidden in plain sight. He spoke of PTSD, of covert training, of deep surveillance skills turned inward. He told the judge I was dangerous not because I raised my voice, but because I never did. Then came the moment that shifted everything. My attorney stood up and said simply, "Your Honor, Emma Miller would like to address the court." Bennett was up in a heartbeat, voice already raised. "Objection. This child has been subjected to months of manipulation. This is inappropriate and emotionally exploitative. But the judge, Justice Hill, lifted her hand and cut through the noise. Mr. Bennett, I'll determine what's appropriate here. Then she turned to Emma. Miss Miller, do you still wish to speak? My daughter stood up from the front row. She was just 9 years old. Small for her age, but in that moment she stood taller than anyone in the room. Her hands trembled slightly as she held up a tablet, clutching it like a lifeline. Her eyes found mine and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I wrote something, she said softly. It's about what family means to me. What it means to Daddy. The courtroom was silent. You could hear the soft hum of the lights overhead. Then, slowly she continued. Yesterday, she said, her voice shaking but strong, I heard you talking to Uncle Nathan. You said you were going to make sure Daddy never sees me again, even if you have to lie about him hurting us. The words dropped like thunder. Then came the sound that ended everything. Rachel's voice, low and sharp, cracked through the courtroom speakers. Emma, you shouldn't be listening to grown-up conversations. Then a pause. And the small, unmistakable voice of our daughter. But Mommy, why would you lie? Silence. Then Rachel again, cold, rehearsed, and stripped of all pretense. Sometimes we have to say things that aren't completely true to protect the people we care about. You'll understand when you're older. And then the words that dropped like ice water down everyone's spine. We just need a few good tears, and the rest will fall into place. Her voice faded. The recording stopped. And for a moment the entire courtroom was suspended in time. No one moved. No one breathed. Rachel sat frozen, her face colorless, drained. Mark Bennett looked like someone had just driven a truck through his case. Every ounce of confidence evaporated. The judge turned to Emma, her voice quiet, measured. Where did you get this, young lady? Emma held her ground, her voice just above a whisper. I recorded it on my tablet. She looked at the judge and added, Daddy told me, if someone's doing something wrong you should save proof. He said, the truth always wins if you're patient enough. Justice Hill blinked. Then gave a subtle nod before telling Emma she could return to her seat. Emma walked back slowly and quietly. I placed a gentle hand on her small shoulder as she sat beside me. She leaned in slightly and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the weight ease from her face. Justice Hill turned her eyes to me, not with wariness, not with doubt, but with something that hadn't been there before. Respect. The storm we'd all been waiting for had finally arrived. And I hadn't even lifted a finger. My daughter, our daughter, had brought the truth forward on her own. She'd carried it into the light, with nothing but her courage and a quiet recording. Rachel's voice, her words, her strategy, it had all just echoed through the courtroom in her own voice. Calm, cold, clear. And I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. There was no anger left in me. Just calm. The kind of calm that comes when you've prepared for every moment, every outcome. I never wanted to destroy her. That was never the point. I just needed the truth to stand on its own. Bennett turned slowly to Rachel, his expression twisting as the reality sank in. Everything, every argument, every accusation, every tactic they had built their case on had just fallen apart in front of everyone. And they knew it. Bennett opened his mouth, maybe searching for one last thread to pull. But nothing came out. Whatever argument he had prepared, whatever last push he thought he could make, vanished. He just stood there for a second, staring at the ground, then quietly began gathering his files. Not a single word passed his lips. And somehow that silence said more than anything he ever could have shouted. Rachel gasped. Barely a sound, like the air had been knocked from her lungs. She stood up shakily, her hands trembling. Your Honor, please, she said, her voice cracking. Emma doesn't understand what she's doing. She's just a little girl. Justice Hill didn't blink. Sit down, Mrs. Miller, she said firmly. You're no longer speaking as a mother. You're now speaking as a defendant under active investigation. She let that sink in before adding, I strongly suggest you consult with your attorney before saying another word. Rachel collapsed into her seat. The polished, picture-perfect version of herself, the calm, collected mother she wanted the court to believe in, was gone. What remained was a shell. Empty. Exposed. I stayed where I was, with Emma still seated beside me. A bailiff approached. Mr. Miller, Justice Hill has asked you to meet briefly with Child Services and court staff to formalize the custody transfer paperwork. It won't take long. I nodded and shook his hand. Thank you. As Emma and I rose and began walking toward the exit, Rachel didn't speak. She didn't follow. She didn't argue or cry or plead. She just watched. Because for the first time she had nothing left to twist. No lie left to tell. No control over what came next. Outside the courthouse, sunlight spilled down on us, bright and clean. Emma walked quietly by my side, her small hand holding mine with steady confidence. She was no longer just a child in that moment. She was someone rising. Someone who had walked through the fire and come out stronger. Not hardened. Not cold. But forged. She hadn't inherited my skills or my training. But she had something far more powerful. She carried the compass behind them. I reached over and brushed a loose strand of hair from her face. "I'm proud of you," I said softly. "Not just because you helped me, but because you chose what was right. Even when it hurt." She smiled up at me. "You always say the truth is like water," she whispered. "It takes time. But it always finds a way." And in that moment I realized, the ending had already begun. Victor Thorne was the first to fall. Word of Nathan Cole's fake $50 million development spread like wildfire through the real estate community. Investors pulled out in droves. Lawsuits began stacking up overnight. His accounts were frozen, assets seized. By the end of the week he was in custody, surrounded by flashing cameras and a flurry of federal charges ranging from wire fraud to embezzlement. The man who once wore smugness like a second skin now looked hollow. His trademark charm had drained into silence, his arrogance replaced with pleading eyes and cuffed wrists. Rachel's unraveling came swiftly behind his. The courtroom audio, her voice calmly instructing a child to lie, was now part of a formal ethics review. Her law license was suspended pending investigation. Clients abandoned her. Cases collapsed. The reputation she tried so hard to build crumbled almost overnight. But I didn't feel triumph. There was nothing in me that celebrated what happened to them. I hadn't needed to destroy them. They were architects of their own collapse. All I did was wait. Their greed, their deception, their relentless thirst for control, it led them straight to the edge. I had only to stand still and let them take that final step. My satisfaction wasn't in watching them fall. It was in knowing my daughter was safe. She had seen the truth rise through the storm. She had been brave enough to speak it out loud. That evening as we drove home, the sky outside was painted in soft streaks of orange and blue. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Emma sat quietly in the back seat, her tablet resting on her lap, her gaze out the window. "You know," I said, keeping my voice low, "sometimes winning doesn't look like victory parades or celebration." She looked up, curious. "Sometimes," I continued, "it just means making it through. Surviving the worst. And you did more than that. You told the truth." She smiled faintly, then leaned forward. "Daddy?" "Yeah. You didn't have to fight them like that, did you?" I kept my eyes on the road. "I had to protect you," I said. "That was the only thing that ever mattered." She nodded. That was enough for her. She turned back to the window, resting her head gently against the glass. In the fading light, I caught her reflection, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something lift. I hadn't needed to raise my voice or kick down doors. I'd only needed patience, and truth, and the quiet strength to see it all through. Rachel and Nathan, they had supplied the rope themselves. All I did was hand it to them and wait while they tied their own knots. The message was simple. Truth doesn't need to shout. It doesn't demand attention. It waits. And when the time is right, it speaks and it stands. Because lies? Lies always collapse under the weight of the people who carry them. This chapter of our lives had finally closed. But the lessons would last forever. And Emma, my daughter, would grow up knowing the strength of patience. The quiet power of doing what's right. And the danger of those too arrogant to check for traps. Dear listeners, thank you for walking through this journey with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to sit in silence, holding the truth, waiting for the right moment to act? Please like, share, and subscribe if this story resonated with you.